Why are 45 out of the 57 Islamic countries in the world poor? And why are the wealthy ones almost entirely dependent on oil? It's a shocking paradox because this is the same civilization that gave the world the Islamic Golden Age, a 500-year period of unrivaled science, mathematics, and philosophy. The streets of Baghdad and Damascus weren't battlegrounds. They were home to the House of Wisdom, the world's largest library. Scholars like Ibn Rushd were laying the groundwork for modern secularism. Al-Khwarizmi was even inventing algebra. So how did a global hub of wisdom become a global hub of poverty and conflict? The answer isn't what you think. It's not terrorism, it's not war, and it's not the religion itself. It's a single fatal system change that happened thousands of years ago. Let's break it down. Why are so many Muslim countries failing? Most people will immediately blame one of the three things: terrorism, war, or religion of Islam itself. But these are all symptoms, not the root cause. Let's test the theory. If the religion was the problem, how do you explain the 500-year Islamic Golden Age when it was the most advanced civilization on earth? And if the ideology was the problem, why are the other two Abrahamic religions so successful? Jews, with just 0.2% of the world's population, have won a staggering 25% of Nobel Prizes. Christian majority nations in Europe and North America are the world's leading superpowers. They all came from the same ideological root, the 1967 Arab-Israel War, where a coalition of Islamic countries was defeated by the tiny state of Israel in just 6 days, proves that the problem is deeper. It's not the religion but a flawed system built around it. One of the biggest symptoms driving poverty today is a massive war within Islam. This isn't a war against the West. It's a bitter cold war between the two biggest sects, Sunni Islam, led by the Saudi Arabia, and Shia Islam, led by Iran. They are locked in a geopolitical battle for control of the entire Muslim world, and they use poorer countries as their battlefields. Here's the destructive pattern. If Saudi Arabia backs a Sunni government, like it did in Yemen, Iran will immediately fund the local Shia rebels, in this case, the Houthis. If Iran supports a Shia allied group, Saudi Arabia will immediately fund their Sunni opponents. The result? Countries like Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon are completely destroyed. Syria has seen 90% of its population fall below the poverty line. In Lebanon, the currency has collapsed so badly that 82% of people are now poor. This endless proxy war ensures that no country caught in the middle can ever stabilize or grow. In 2010, a fire of revolution swept the Middle East. It was called the Arab Spring. Millions of people, led by young activists, rose up against their dictators. Their demand was simple: democracy. They believed that if they could just vote, they could end the corruption and build a prosperous future. They were tragically wrong. In almost every single country, with the exception of Tunisia, the Arab Spring failed. Demand for democracy didn't lead to freedom. It led to more poverty and even stronger dictatorships. In Yemen, the democratically elected leader was assassinated by rebels, plunging the country into a deeper civil war. In Libya, they got a fake democracy that works just like North Korea's, a dictatorship in disguise. In Syria, they didn't get a new government at all. They just got 12 years of brutal conflict. Well, democracy can't be planted in a field where the soil itself is toxic, and that toxic soil is flawed economic and social system. So how do you guarantee a nation stays poor? You destroy its banking system. In many Islamic countries, a strict literal interpretation of Sharia law forbids riba, or charging interest on loans. But a modern economy cannot function without a banking system that uses interest to manage risk and provide credit. Islamic banks tried to create a workaround using an equity-based model. Instead of giving a loan, the bank buys a share of the business, and if the business profits, the bank profits. But what if the business fails? Which, as we know, most new businesses do. The bank loses all its money. This model is incredibly high risk, and it has led to bank failures and a massive lack of capital. Without a stable banking system, entrepreneurs can't get loans, new businesses can't be built, jobs aren't created, and the entire country remains stagnant. And this is just one part of the system that actively blocks the tool of modern development. The Islamic Golden Age was built entirely on rational thought and science. Today, in many of those same countries, there is a war on science. The statistics are devastating. All Islamic countries combined, which make up to 27% of the world's population, contribute only to 0.5% of global spending on research and development. In 2020, the tiny country of Israel alone published over 22,000 scientific papers. All the major Islamic countries combined published only 10,000. Why? Because science is often thought to be atheist or Western propaganda. Madrasa education systems frequently focus only on religious texts, not on practical math, science, or critical thinking. This creates a population that is easily misled by its leader who want to keep people uneducated. When people can't think critically, they can't question authority, and that is the entire goal. So, what is the real root cause? For that, we have to go back to the 11th century. The scientific rationale Abbasid Caliphate, who was Sunni, was losing power to rising Shia dynasties. To fight back, they allied with Seljuk Turks and appointed a powerful minister named Nizam-al-Mulk. To fight Shia ideology, Nizam-al-Mulk created a new competing education system, the Nizamiya madrasas. But these schools taught a radical, new anti-science ideology called Asharid thought. It taught that cotton doesn't burn because of fire, it burns because it's Allah's will. It replaced all logic and reason with blind devotion. This was the man and the system that sowed the seeds of extremism and destroyed the House of Wisdom's legacy. But how did he get everyone to follow it? With one simple, devastating policy. Nizam-al-Mulk created his anti-science madrasa system. But how did he make it more popular than the scientific House of Wisdom? He used a political and economic incentive. The Abbasid Caliph declared that from that day forward, all top government jobs like judges, administrators and officials would only be given to graduates of this new Nizamiya madrasa system. In an instant, rational thought and science became worthless for one's career. To get a job, to feed your family, you had to enroll in this anti-science school. This single policy shift incentivized the entire civilization to abandon rational thinking. The Mongols may have physically destroyed the House of Wisdom, but this policy destroyed its soul. While Europe was translating those very same Arabic books and sparking its own renaissance, the Islamic world was walking away from science. The problem was never Islam, it was and still is the fatal merger of politics and religion into one system, where flawed leaders can trade their people's future for their own power.